Russell, thank you very much. Completely fascinating. I think the key message there is it's about the people. The technology, the research, the focus is all well and good, but it's really about the people and how those people are treated. So what I want to do now is begin to move over to our panel discussion. Please feel free to put some questions into the chat online, and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can. Just one note I want to make, we will be pausing at 12 o'clock. For those of you that are not aware, the Marie Curie charity is having a National Day of Reflection on the first anniversary of when we've locked down for COVID, and it's given people 1 minute to reflect on our collective loss, thought for those who have been bereaved, and also hope for a brighter future as we begin to come out of a lockdown in a phased basis. So I will be interrupting at 12 o'clock for a minute's silence at that point in time. So I'd like to welcome our panelists. I'd also like, most of these you've seen present today, but I'd also like to introduce Dr. Amanda Chmura from the ESPRC. I'll get this out right, EPSRC.
That's right.
Yes, and such. And so I've got a number of questions that have been coming in, and I'll kind of move around in the time that we have remaining. But one of the first questions I've had come up was on how do you address the lack of progress and failure in this whole research environment? You're trying to create value, but it doesn't always work out. And then the companies will shut the project down for whatever reason. So I think what I'll do in that first instance, I guess, and I know it's a bit of pressure, Dr. Chmura, but can I ask you to kind of address that one in the first instance?
Yeah, well, I'll have a go at it. Yes, thank you very much. So I am Deputy Director for Business Partnerships and Impact in EPSRC. And so I think from our perspective, from the funder's perspective, we absolutely do not expect that everything is going to work. And we've heard a lot of talk about this new area, Advanced Research and Innovation Agency. I think that's what they're calling it. A new funding organization that's going to be set up by the government, and how it's going to be really risky and do all these risky programs. But I think we in UKRI and EPSRC in particular, I can see Idris shaking his head there. He knows we don't expect people to be completely successful all the time. But with my impact hat on in EPSRC and accelerating the impact of our research, we want to understand even those failures, what impact can come out of that. And so I think, we are always willing to kind of go back to the drawing board with people, with businesses as well, where things haven't worked, and think, okay, well, what can we do next time? Or how can we take whatever learning we've got from this and take that forward?
Great, thank you for that. I guess, Joseph, as a working in a commercial operation, would you have a different perspective on that? So if it's failure, let's cut our losses and move on, or is you got a different view on that?
Yeah, in the commercial world, Mike, I think it's really, really important that a business is agile, not only in its approach to the markets, but also in its approach to product development. And you'll hear the phrase bandied around quite frequently about fail fast, fail often. And that's certainly something that we would embrace. We would not be afraid of failure in pursuit of the right solution for the clients that we build technologies for.
Great, thanks for that. So Russell, can I turn to you about the people impact of this? So you've got, you've got academia going, well, it's okay. You got business saying, well, no, we got to fail fast and move on, and it could be a bit risky for the employees. How would you see that from a people perspective? How do you keep these people focused on the stuff?
I think failure is an inherent part of attempting to do anything, and therefore I think in organizations, you need to have a culture where there's an acceptance that failure is part and parcel of achieving and success and delivering, and it's the flip side of the coin. I mean, it was Edison who said, I didn't fail to make an electric light bulb 49 times. I just learned how not to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that key aspect of whether it's through schooling, and I have a 10-year-old, so this is quite, my sweet spot at the moment, or whether it's through learning, it's making failure a part of life and an acceptance of it, and not to be scared of it, actually to embrace it and to understand how you can learn from it. I mean, the failure is if you don't learn from it. Yeah, the failure is if you repeat the same mistakes. And that's the point. Failure per se is actually a almost liberating learning experience, and that's cultural in organizations.
Okay, I'll come back to that because we have a question specifically for you as well, Russell. But I also want to address a question to Professor Eckly. You mentioned the serendipity word a couple of times in your presentation. I've always been fascinated by the serendipity of invention and of research. Sometimes you accidentally discover stuff, but you were going down a completely different path. I mean, how do you kind of reconcile that in the current commercial environment, whether it's in academia or business?
Well, and it's maybe a bit curious for a mathematician to be talking about serendipity as well, given how black and white things are for us in the math sciences. I think just experience has taught me, working with all these different organizations over the years, and in particular, I'd highlight Unilever, Shell, and BT as three organizations in particular where I found this. By allowing yourself to take on board and be influenced by the understanding and learning that others have had, you're opening yourself up to new ways of thinking beyond those that you have yourself, those that are maybe there naturally within your discipline, and that creates opportunities for things to happen. And I think that's a really, I think being open to seeing the signs of change and differences, I think is something quite powerful. But also, you also, by having these different connects, you're able to kind of, take ideas from one place and lift them to somewhere else in a way that you would never have imagined. Certainly when I started on analyzing hairstyles in my PhD, I never thought that I'd be thinking about, how those ideas there might morph into something that is now, is used to analyze and find, anomalies in the way that IP networks are working. But that's the richness of research life, and the fact that we get to look in everybody's gardens and see what's going on.
Great. And I think if I go to you, Dr. Drake, about in your journey, as a postgraduate researcher, I'm assuming there's been periods of time of serendipity when maybe your research took you in a different direction than you originally planned?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what is kind of exposed to public view is the is the external face of our research, but the failures are something which are not always part of the publications and the visible artifacts of the kind of research that we do, and so those failures and those things that don't quite work out are often not publicly visible, but they're very much a kind of fundamental part of the process.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And we've had one other question here, and it's come in. It's about this moving from academia into business, and then maybe back to academia again. So, Dr. Chmura, I'll start with you on that one. Any advice or guidance to people watching this on that kind of movement?
Yeah, so I think, it's something that in EPSRC we really want to encourage people to do throughout their careers. And I think if we're honest with ourselves about it, we're really, really successful at supporting it at the PhD stage. And I think it probably gets less successful as people go on, through their careers, although we've seen some notable examples today of people who've been really successful. And, I guess I would say that, we're working closely with universities in particular to make sure that our focus on that kind of mobility and porosity between academia and industry is reflected in the way that universities reward and recognize their staff. And that, the working on more applied areas and working, with industry is given just as much recognition in the institutions as, just as the people who are focusing on getting, the nature papers or whatever. But I think in terms of how people can sort of generate those collaborations and and be successful in getting funding from the research councils. I would say that, all the opportunities that EPSRC has for funding, there's the opportunity to bring business alongside you in that, whether it be a fellowship, whether it be your first grant, whether it be a program grant or some of the prosperity partnership type of funding that, that Idris talked about earlier. Every kind of funding you can get from EPSRC, you can bring business partners along with that. So, and we encourage people to do that, and the assessment panels and the reviewers know that as well. And so I would just encourage people to try and do it from the very beginning.
Great, thank you. And Joseph, once again from with your commercial hat on, do you have a view on that one as well?
Yeah, sure. So obtaining public funds carries a responsibility, right? So whether you are publicly funded through a research council such as Amanda was talking about, or somewhere else, if you're dealing with any public funds as part of your business, then you have to make sure that you embrace transparency, accountability, and be ready to report on what you do with that money. So I just want to commend our monitoring officer at UKRI Innovate UK, Ibella Howe, for the way in which she's worked really collaboratively and closely with us throughout the project that UKRI funded us on, the one that I spoke about earlier today.
Great, thank you. And Dr. Drake, you kind of made that movement to some extent from academia into business, and then you seem to be kind of moving back between the two fairly effortlessly. I mean, any guidance or advice from anybody on how to make those moves?
Yeah, I mean, certainly I think the research area that I have, so it's working in optimization, is almost a natural fit for kind of industrial collaboration. And it's almost more of a battle to convince people that it's actually got, more blue skies, pure research academic value and that aspect of it. I think just to reiterate maybe, one of the points I made in the presentation is that I think we talk about accountability and being able to sort of say what you've done with funds and things like that. It's about answering that so what question. So why should people care? And I think as part of research, and no matter how blue skies it is and how pure that research might be, somewhere there's somewhere that you can kind of fit in an implementation or a deployment strategy of how that research might actually be applied in the real world, and kind of keeping that in your back of your mind. So who will care about this? Who is likely to go and use this? Is something which I think has kind of successfully kept me on the track of maintaining relevance in both industry and academia.
Great, thank you. Professor Eckly, do you have a view?
Yeah, I mean, so I spent 6 years after my PhD working in industry before coming back to academia, and probably was planning the move from Shell back to academia for about 12 months before I actually made the change. I think the longer the period of time you spend out, the harder it is to move across. It will be discipline specific, and it'll depend on what your kind of precise role is, but it can be a lot of work, and I didn't expect quite how much work it would be to kind of rehabilitate myself as an academic after spending time out. But the one thing that was crucial for me was the relationships that I developed along the way, and the partnerships and the collaborations I had. Still had relationships with Unilever at that time. Obviously, was leaving Shell on good terms, and both of those as early supporters of my academic career were crucial. And so that was a very formative part of my outlook on collaboration and the importance of it. Great.
So we've got about 40 seconds before we go into the to the moment of remembrance from that perspective. But I guess a question for everybody to consider here is, and I'll come back to the people aspects, Russell. I want to give you more time to answer this. But one of the questions that have come through is about relating to the exclusion in teams, and about, can this decrease psychological safety, the result being teams are less able to be innovative? What are your thoughts of embedding psychological safety where it is at risk? I think this is a question that if I can, during this 1 minute moment of silence, if I can ask everybody to reflect on that, and then when we come back, we'll get to that question, okay? So if we can now cut over to a 1 minute moment of silence, please. Great, everybody. Thank you very much for that. So if we can come back to our panel. So this question of exclusion, Russell, I'll start with you on this. How do we think we best address that issue?
Firstly, massive subject, and I've got about 30 seconds, 45 seconds to answer it. I think it's interesting what Idris was talking about in terms of these serendipitous conversations. I think actually ultimately what you're digging into is diversity, and actually not diversity in the way most organizations measure it, which is, for brevity, a tick box exercise, but diversity of thought, diversity of background, diversity of experience. That's what you want in order to create innovation and this spontaneity and these interactions. I think too many organizations start at the diversity because it's easy to measure, but diversity per se doesn't solve your problem. You need to have inclusion, but just because I invite you to a meeting doesn't solve the problem, because unless I hear you, unless you feel safe to say what you want to say without fear of repercussion, unless you belong, you won't get the value of the diversity that you've tried to do. If you focus on diversity, you're just filling a leaky pipe. I think psychological safety is critical because it is that feeling that it's safe to speak up, it's safe to have an opinion, it's safe to disagree, it's safe to just talk out loud without fear of, you're saying you disagree because you disagree with it, not because you're picking a fight or you don't like the person or any of those things. So again, brevity on that. If you look at the Google research, I love Google because they publish their data. I think psychological safety was one of the top 5 elements of all of their successful teams. And ultimately, for brevity, and guessing the next question, it comes down to trust and trusting the people in the teams. It comes down to having almost clear accountability so that you know why people are there and what they're there to do, so that there's no social loafing. If it's all kind of free for all, willy-nilly, or we'll just do it, it's, well, I don't know if Joseph's doing his stuff or not. So it's collaborate, it's making clear what we're here to do, what the common goals are, what we're trying to achieve, what each person's responsibility is, that we can having conversations because we do trust each other and we value their input and their feedback and their commentary on things.
Great, Russell, thanks. So I guess when you get to a certain age, if you look at me, I'm a gentleman of a certain age. I have no qualms about pushing back, but I guess if you're a younger person, maybe going through in your postgraduate research, just starting off in industry, it's probably a lot more difficult from that perspective. So I guess from that perspective, Dr. Drake, I mean, do you have any insights in terms of how to encourage that, or have you dealt with those kinds of things yourself in the past?
I'm not sure if I've dealt with them in the past, but I think one of the things to sort of I think bear in mind when you're an early career researcher is making sure that you focus on the things that are within your control. And I think people can kind of get bogged down with much wider, much larger issues that on a day-to-day level don't really necessarily directly affect them, and they don't necessarily have direct control over. So I think really, focusing on the things that you can control and the things that have an impact on your day-to-day working are really the things that I would focus on as an earlier career researcher, because that that sphere of influence will grow over time.
Okay, great. Professor Eckly, do you have a perspective on that one?
I guess the only thing I'd add to what Russell was saying was I think having different mechanisms for communication to be able to tap into different people's views and opinions is important. Not everybody will be comfortable doing that in the room. Not everybody will be comfortable doing it online. Not everybody will be comfortable doing it in an email or something. But finding the way that allows that individual to communicate in to the team, I think, is quite an important thing. And being open to trying out those various mechanisms. It takes a little bit more time, but it's really worth it.
Okay. And Dr. Chmura?
Yeah, so I guess I just want to touch on a few of the comments that are made around trust there. I think in terms of the really successful academic industrial collaborations that we've seen in EPSRC, one of the key elements there is that, building on what Russell said, that the people involved, they really feel that they are bringing something to that relationship. The academic isn't just the problem solver that you go to when you have these little problems, or the industrial people aren't just the money, that they're both bringing, real knowledge and understanding of the problems that they're trying to solve and work on it together. And when we've got sort of, major collaborations, sort of multi-million-pound collaborations that we've supported between academia and industry, one of the questions we always ask people is, what are you going to do when you disagree? How are you going to work that out together? And talking about how you're going to work that out together before the disagreements happen, I think in any relationship is an important thing.
Great. Joseph, once again, from a commercial perspective, since you've been predominantly the commercial guy here today.
Yeah, a bit of a standout thing, isn't it? So from the commercial angle, how do we design products for people who would otherwise find it very difficult to use them? So, we talked on the word inclusion, haven't we, just a few moments ago? And so a company like Envine, we take that responsibility very seriously. We work with major charities such as Leonard Cheshire and an organisation called Open Inclusion. These people help us to design products for people who live with disabilities of varying types, whether that's a physical disability or cognitive disability, or maybe they find embracing technology difficult by virtue perhaps of their language barriers, their cultural barriers, or their age groupings. So we have to consider these things also in the way in which we answer the problems that our customers give us to deliver a technology solution that's designed for all.
Great, thank you. So we've probably got time for one more question to go around the panel, and unfortunately, it's a big one. Mark Power, who used to work at BT, I believe he's now working at one of the local universities, because throughout education from primary school onwards, students are now strategically driven to achieve, and fear of failure is overwhelming many. How can this be reversed so that we develop world-class researchers? And somebody says this is about building resilience in them into children at a young age to where they can cope with this kind of thing. So, once again, Russell, I'll start with you on this one. This is a big question, really, isn't it?
If I could answer this one in 30 seconds, I'd probably be on a beach right now. I think it's a really good question, and I think it's been going on for generations. And you're not going to solve it overnight. So I think Time magazine called millennials the me generation. It's all about me. It's me. I'm the important thing. And if you consider schooling, or what potentially I went through, although that was quite a while ago, what my nephews have gone through, my daughter goes through, everyone gets a badge, everyone gets a medal, everyone gets a certificate for turning up. It's almost I could come home on a Friday when my daughter was 4, and it's a Friday, and there's another certificate on the fridge, and there's another one the week after, and so on and so forth. And actually, you think what that sets in the mindset of achievement, or getting something, getting a certificate, or being rewarded for something, and therefore an expectation creation going forward when you get into work. And I think you see that playing out certainly pre-pandemic, with potentially tenure rates, with potentially people expecting to have a bigger impact in the workplace, and so on and so forth. How do you solve it? You're not going to solve it overnight. It's got to be, as I said earlier, it's got to be cultural in terms of helping people realize that failure is you're going to fail more often than you're going to probably succeed, to be kind of binary over it. So the fact that actually trying to realize that is the case, and actually that failure isn't bad, it's a necessary learning process. And actually, if you could do it right first time, every time, then you probably should be teaching, not actually being a student. And that's something I go through with my daughter. There's a reason why you have a teacher and why she is at school to learn, because otherwise she would be the one being paid. So, you know, it's a long-term conversation.
Okay, great. Dr. Chmura, you have a view?
I suppose I'd echo that. So I've got a 6-year-old, and we are definitely at the stage of lots of certificates still. But we're also at the stage of talking about, so yeah, I can't do that, but I can't do that yet. And thinking about, you know, they keep trying, so, you know, trying and experimenting, and yes, you're going to fail, but that doesn't mean that you just stop doing it. You know, that you learn from that, you know, and you carry on there. And I think, I mean, this is probably just because we in EPSRC, we don't, we do public engagement, but we don't do sort of the kind of general public engagement that some other organizations do at the kind of primary school and early secondary school level. But I think more practical experience for children of science and technology in schools is a way to help them fail and understand that you're going to fail and keep moving on from that. And that's something that we, you know, I hope in UKRI will continue to work on more widely with other organizations that do public engagement.
That's great. Thank you very much for that. So unfortunately, we've kind of timed out, so I'm going to have to start to bring this session to a close. Some fantastic insights. So I'd like to just say thank you to all of our panelists, Dr. Amanda Chmura, Professor Eckly, Joseph Spear, Dr. John Drake, and Russell Beck. Thank you very much for your time, for your presentations, and for your answers today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, so I just want to start kind of laying the groundwork for day 2 of our Tommy Flowers Institute. Tommy Flowers Network even. I forgot about the fact that we've changed the name. So just as a reminder, we start at 1 o'clock tomorrow. And we're going to have another panel talking about the maximizing the value of research. And then we've got some really fascinating presentations and fireside chats around a range of different technologies. So I really look forward to seeing everybody there tomorrow. Please, if you got any other questions, please drop it in the chat. I believe we've also asked for some feedback in the chat as well in these sessions to kind of keep us honest in terms of make sure we're delivering a good product at the end of the day. So that being the case, I'm going to bring this session to a close, and hopefully we'll see everybody tomorrow. Thank you very much.